All right. So everyone, I'm Thomas. I'm from Canada, and my project is AI-powered sensor networks to digitize chemical plants. Here's our product. It's a plug-and-play device designed for unprecedented scale, and it works by analyzing sound and vibration behavior of plant equipment. One of the biggest areas of operating a plant is maintenance. It's like maintaining a car the size of a football stadium. And as time goes on without maintenance, safety risk increases and efficiency in the plant decreases. Now, while there's a lot of things to be maintained, the first application we're targeting is steam leaks, leaks that are invisible to workers. So when steam is lost, boilers have to work harder and burn more fuel to reproduce that steam. And globally, this wastes $53 billion of fuel and 230 million tons of unnecessary CO2 emissions every year. So when you understand that, our product and service is very intuitive. We make these invisible leaks visible as a hardware-enabled SaaS business. So instead of doing a huge trip around the entire site, an operator can just check his phone, and more importantly, he'll be alerted right away. And these fuel savings from early leak detection can save a single plant in the order of $3 million annually. But this does come with its challenges. The first being noise and vibrations from other heavy machinery in the plant. We've solved this by creating an innovative software approach that estimates the spatial patterns of sound. So this actually allows us to filter and separate sound sources based on location. And this is a big advantage we have over other competitors trying to enter this market. By the end of last year, we finished the technology. And since then, we've been running paid pilots with already 70 monitors out in the field. And at these select sites we're at, the conversion value is worth over 500,000 ARR. And once we're at full production, we expect very fast growth based on current sales interest. Okay, thank you everyone for listening. And if you're an investor and this is something that interests you, we're currently fundraising our seed round. But otherwise, I'm happy to chat with anyone who's interested in learning more about tech in the industrial sector. Thank you.
Great presentation. Loved the flow of it. Am I doing this right, by the way? I just kind of jump in there and go at it, Daniel? Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. All right. So did I catch your biography and the makeup of the team? Like, was that anywhere in the presentation?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Okay. That's might be like the flow of your presentation was perfect, except you kind of left out the most important thing. I prefer to have the about you at the front, because the business isn't about the business. You know, there's some investors that just invest in big markets and emerging industries, but I like to invest in people. And so I'm curious to hear about your background, and that usually you put that up first, and then I'll kind of like dig in about your background, why you became a founder, all these sorts of things. And
well,
so that's
just ask him now about his background, Kevin.
Thomas, Can you tell me about your background?
Yeah, so my background is environmental and process engineering, which kind of was the first kind of indicator that I wanted to get into this field. But I also have a background in AI and electronics. So if I was to draw a Venn diagram of those three things, Pulse Industrial would fit well in the center of that. And just throughout my university, I've always wanted to incorporate more new technology into the process industry, which I think there's a huge lack thereof.
Are you concerned at all that, given you've had this experience on these, you know, have seen the process industry, which I know very little about, do you think that biases you towards an old way of doing things? Or how do you come in and be very innovative in a fashion that, you know, say the Stripe team, John and Patrick, knew nothing about payments before entering?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good question. I mean, for one, I'm still very young in my career, so I haven't been fully corrupted by the old ways of doing things. But on that end, you know, I'm very active in just learning about new technology, new electronics that's coming out in AI, and I'm constantly thinking about ways we can integrate that into the process industry. So like one example is, maybe you've seen this in movies and stuff, you have these big industrial sites with these huge control rooms where there's tons of wiring going around everywhere. Everything is very rigid and set like that. And what what we're trying to move over to is a more plug and play way of communicating data back to the cloud. So what we do to enable this is we have these routers that come pre-configured to LTE networks. So when we want to get our data set up and start collecting results back from sensors, all the customer needs to do is plug something into the wall, which doesn't require any security risk on their end of interfering with their on-site systems. And as well, it's just way easier. We don't need to get IT involved.
Got it.
So that's one way that sometimes we present these solutions, and at first they're a little unsure. They're like, is this going to work? Like, is this something we're allowed to do? And then we actually go ahead and set that up, and it's really refreshing on both our end and their end too.
Great, got it. So a few tangential comments. One, Thomas, is you should always have your camera above your screen, because you're kind of looking off to the side and not making eye contact.
I see that, yeah.
So I'm going to go through these apply to everyone, is like the kind of presentation key points. Always know, always know also when you go in to present to an investor, how much time exactly you have and cater your presentation. So say if you have an hour presentation, you usually want to get through the entire presentation in say 20 minutes. And also kind of pause a lot, because you really want an investor jumping in and asking questions. If they're not, they're either super excited and they understand it all, or more likely they're kind of like looking at their Apple Watch or like dozing off, and you've kind of lost them. So as much as you can drive an investor into an interactive discussion, it's more powerful. And also, like, you answered that question well, but then, I'd suggest kind of pausing more and, letting like the question trailed off a little bit in a different direction. I know you want to get little nuggets about the business in there, and you are, but like I have ADD, and so I kind of do actually. And so I, as soon as like the sentence goes on for like more than 2 or 3 minutes, you kind of lose me. And you usually have to talk to investors in very short and concise sentences, because they're not as smart as founders. So those are just a few things on like the presentation format. Going to the business, like how much capital did it take you to get to where you are today?
About 150,000.
That's remarkable. Like that's, I think some of the best investors always look at kind of like progress to capital ratio, and the fact that you've done this all on 150,000. So you have a $500,000 annual pilot in place. Is that correct?
So we're at the sites we're at. Once they convert after the pilots, that value is 500,000.
Got it. And sorry, how many pilots do you have?
We have 7 right now, and quite a bit more coming in.
That's phenomenal. Like that alone. So the ideal is like, how do you show with extreme constraints? Like being an entrepreneur is working under extreme constraints, and how does ingenuity and great things come out of that? And so $150,000 in CAD, it's like a YC without raising anything after it. You've gotten to 7 pilots, and that's something to really, you might want to show like this much tiny money came in at this date, and this is what you produced out the other side. And I love businesses that are very capital efficient, that really watch every dollar and invest it wise. You're a capital allocator in a sense, and you have to, and you're finding ways to, you're probably going out there installing these networks on your own. You're like hacking and building software on the side, because I would have guessed it would have taken much more capital. And so that's something to, to come across. It's also enticing that you have a model where you go in and install these sensors. When I looked at, your background and what you were doing, I was like, oh God, it's another hardware company, and you install it and walk away. And, but the fact that it's this ongoing monitoring piece is very important to emphasize, and thus, how that cascades over time, that it's very hard to rip and replace. And, why would they ever take this out, is interesting. Some few other non sequitur thoughts is on the TAM, your total addressable market. You show how much money is, lost each year, towards these inefficiencies. but then how do you narrow it down is like, what do you address and so on. So you can show that, at least have a reference to where you found that data. But then secondly, how if you did a bottoms up analysis, you did a top down, you're like maybe taking some sector reports or so on, I'm guessing, and saying this much is lost. How much time do we have, by the way?
We're at time.
Okay, good. So the other is to do a bottoms up analysis. Daniel's doing this thing where he flashes in and out. He's got this like flashing video. I swear it's not distracting at all. But this is good for a founder to have someone like Daniel popping in and out to intimidate you. I'm kidding.
Okay, Kevin. Okay, let's.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank
That
you
was
very
great
much.
feedback, and I look forward to
hold
your
on, I'm
presentation.
not done yet. So the thing is to do a bottoms up analysis where, you know, like if you have one factory and you're going to get on average of 500,000 to 2 million, how many does that apply to? How big is the market? How can you reach that $1 billion in annual sales over time?
Right.